Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And a couple of weeks ago, I discussed Trump's pardon attorney saying no MAGA left behind as the president ordered the pardon of a former sheriff imprisoned for 10 years for corruption. The sheriff was a MAGA supporter and so, like the January 6th insurrectionists, pardoned for any federal crimes they're found guilty of. The suggestion being that Trump will pardon you for crimes committed as long as you are one of the MAGA cult. Well, the police have just apprehended the prime suspect in the murder and attempted murder of Minnesota lawmakers. He's a Trump supporter. Trump himself has condemned the attacks. But nonetheless, if he's convicted of the murders, and those murders were committed in support of MAGA politics, what will Trump do? Abandon him? In which case it looks like some MAGA can be left behind. Or pardon him as part of a test of his control over American justice. But first, for daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel to stay notified. So, authorities have taken the prime suspect for the murder and attempted murder of Minnesota legislators into custody. Almost seems like a very unlikely outcome when you see reports of shooters in America, doesn't it? Where it often seems to be the case that they either turn the gun on themselves or are shot by police during the ensuing shootout. But Boulter was able to get away from police at the scenes of the crimes and seems to have no intention of taking his own life, even after the police had made his name public, and he will have known he could not hide forever. Is this because Boulter is comfortable going to prison for his crimes, or because he believes that any conviction will be pardoned fairly quickly? We may not know for a little while, and Boulter's precise motives for the attacks are not exactly clear now either. So what do we know? Well, we know he'd worked for the Democrats in Minnesota, not as a supporter, but in administrative roles. He doesn't seem to have been very vocal about politics in public, from what I can tell. But according to a close friend of his, he was a Trump supporter. He certainly voted for Trump and he opposed abortion. So there would be the political link in terms of why he may not approve of the Democrats. The potentially more relevant information is actually about his finances, maybe, than his political activities, of which there seem to be none, beyond not liking abortion and voting for Trump. An article in the New York Times before his arrest talked of having various ambitions, but essentially picking up jobs to make ends meet. His friend described him as having both financial and mental health difficulties. He said, and I quote, he just gave up on life for some reason. So his motivation may turn out to be driven more by a desperate need to change the direction of his life in a way where he felt he had agency than some long festering political philosophy. Unless, of course, he blames the Democrats in Minnesota for his life's malaise. There has to be some reason why he's targeted Democrats, doesn't it? It's not just the two he attacked. He reportedly had a list of other targets. But whatever his motivation, the evidence very much points to Boulter being responsible for the attacks, meaning he will almost certainly be charged, convicted, and presumably sentenced to imprisonment. Now, let's go back to that sheriff for a moment. He was in prison for corruption. The corruption wasn't linked to helping MAGA or Trump. He was just helping himself. He was a greedy, corrupt lawman. Trump pardoned him seemingly for no reason other than he wanted it to be known that if you bend the knee to Trump, he will look after you. Trump's pardon attorney backed that sentiment up with the message, no MAGA left behind. So what will Trump do about Boulter if and when he's sentenced? Boulter doesn't seem to have made a public song and dance about being pro-MAGA. We don't even know if he owns a hat, or at least not a red hat with MAGA on it. But his friend did say that he was open about voting for Trump. Does that make him MAGA enough to not be left behind? But public support aside, what about his act? It gives Republicans control in Minnesota. The former sheriff's corruption didn't help MAGA. He was spared just because of his public support. But if the Minnesota Republicans are MAGA inclined, and I don't know whether they are or they are not, they now have the opportunity to push Trump's agenda. Surely Boulter has done more to help Trump than a fat sheriff who tried to line his own expansive pockets. I mean, let's work on a particular line of thinking. What was the no MAGA left behind statement supposed to mean? Simply that if you publicly support Trump, then federal law means nothing to you because you'll be pardoned? That doesn't seem to be worth Trump's time. Seems more likely to me that Trump is more interested in the MAGA supporters who will commit acts such as on Capitol Hill a few years ago, which ultimately weren't successful, but that's what he wanted to see. I mean, simple corruption in public office, that doesn't help Trump. It seemed to me a way of encouraging unofficial brown shirt operations, confident that federal convictions for even very serious acts will be pardoned, as long as it's in line with Trump's implied plan. But what happens if Boulter is left by Trump to rot in prison? Will that send mixed messages to MAGA gun nuts? Or will Trump be able to claim that Boulter wasn't MAGA because he didn't have the hat? But if we assume Boulter is convicted and Trump doesn't pardon him, will that be because public opinion will turn on him for doing so? In which case, why wouldn't it for a MAGA loon targeting a federal judge or national senator who displeased him? The "No MAGA left behind" comment was intended to send a message. It was intended to create a two-tier society where federal law does not apply for certain people if they obey Trump. But what does Trump want them to do in return for that protection? If he wants them to take out his opponents, this is a test case for his protection right here. What does "No MAGA left behind" mean? You can break federal law as long as you support Trump, but also as long as the crime isn't too serious. We may need to pay attention to what Trump says about the case when his aides haven't written his lines for him. So far, his most recent comments took the form of attacking Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. I've not heard him express any humanity towards the people murdered or lying in hospital or the wider community, despite condemning the act. I mean, after the dust settles a bit, Trump is obviously going to start talking in a bit more unguarded terms. Will he soften his tone on the alleged murderer, or will he have to accept that some MAGA need to be left behind? But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.